Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. I am your host, Daniel Blackaby, and I'm joined once again, as I always am, by the one and only Naya Carlson. Naya, how are you doing today?
Today, Daniel, I am feeling like a diva. I
Oh,
am feeling diva up, as the youths would say. How are you
well,
feeling?
Well, I don't know if I'm feeling like a diva. I've got the diva energy from you actually for several episodes now. So I'm glad that this has come out, that you've
I just
embraced your inner diva.
I just felt like I had to come clean and be honest with you and all of our listeners. So
Yeah,
thank you for allowing me that space.
the first step to growth is sort of self-awareness and acceptance.
Exactly.
So we're glad for that. But speaking of someone who may or may not be a diva, it's not just me and you this week. We once again have a very special guest joining us, back by popular demand, in fact. Now, why don't you introduce our guest for the episode?
Yes, our guest today is an assistant principal at a Christian school and teach in Ohio. Let me say that specifically, and teaches a gospel and movies class. He loves watching movies and blogging about them, so we'll link his website in the show notes. There's some pretty good stuff on there. And he's the master of puns. He loves spending time with his family and playing pickleball. So thank you, Unix Diza, for being on our podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, Naya, glad to be here. I'm thankful you said Diza rather than Diva, because that. So whether or not that may be true or not is more or less certain. But I'm glad to be back. I was looking at it. It looks like I was here for episode 37, and so much time has gone by that I ended up growing a goatee to match Daniel. Because if you were to look back, like I was like babyface Unix Diza back then. But so much time has transpired, so much maturing and growth that I just I just figured I need to match Daniel. So there you go.
Maturity is a goatee, as they say.
Yeah, you grew a goatee. Sam became a woman. There are a lot of changes here from.
We need to clarify what that means.
Yes, Sam is in fact still a man and still around. But we're glad to have you back, or at least I'm glad to have you back, because Naya was not here the first time you were on this podcast. I will say we've had some fun guests on this podcast before. You're one of the first that we've actually had back. So I don't know if that just says something about high praise for you or low praise for us, that no one wants to come back on our podcast. So we'll let people decide for that. Before we get into, because there's some interesting stuff that for us to jump into for this episode, I wanted to talk about movie genres, something we all sort of know what genres are, but I think we don't always talk. We don't really explore the significance of that, at least from like a gospel perspective. So a lot to get into. Before we do though, maybe just share a little bit. We mentioned, and longtime listeners that heard your first episode, I know we sort of grilled you and you shared a little bit, but maybe share this kind of real briefly, just some of the work you do with that gospel and film class. Because the work you do is awesome. I was actually zoomed into your class this morning, so I've been able to peek in and see some of what you guys do. But maybe just share a little bit kind of what you do in that class.
Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of genesis or origin story of that class, actually, like, it's not the school I'm currently at in Ohio, but the school that like took a chance on me right out of college. I've always enjoyed watching movies. Like, my dad brought me up on like Turner Classic Movies, TCM, and just like old classic film, and just all different sorts of movies. So I grew to have a love of film. And then as a family, we'd always discuss, what we're watching, try to think deeply and critically about it, but also just enjoy it. But when I started working, I pitched the idea of just like a generic film class, and it really didn't have any sort of gospel ethos to it. So I just basically, I showed films from like all over. So I'd show like a sci-fi movie. Like, it was very much like, we'll get to it later, but like different genres and different topics, I guess. So it was more topical. It didn't really have a solid anchor. And then my mother-in-law gave me a book as a gift for Christmas. I think Frank Turek was the author. It's called like Hollywood Heroes or something, like how like heroes or stories reveal like who God is or who Jesus is. So I just read that book, and I just felt called to, at my current school, just start. And I've been doing this. This is my third year. And I've taught, it's a semester class. So I've had 6 batches of students go through this class, and we just watch good movies. They're not necessarily like faith-based movies. In fact, I don't think any of them are. They're just like good. Some of them are blockbusters. They're just like good quality film, and then we just look to see what gospel echoes we can pull from it. So there's a lot of discussion. Daniel has joined when he's available, so we're very grateful for that. I asked Sam, by the way, Daniel, but he was my first choice, so that's why I have to keep coming back
But
to you. So
he charged too much though. Was his
yeah, the cover
his
charge
fees
was a
are
little too
pretty.
much. I
Yeah.
said, Daniel's always willing to do stuff pro bono, so I suppose, I don't have super deep pockets with what I'm trying to do in my class. So let's go with him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm happy to be Sam's backup. Yeah, I think I don't know how many semesters I've been coming in. Is it three,
I think
three,
you
four?
it's definitely,
Uh,
maybe not the first year, but for the past two years, 4 semesters, um, yeah, it's been a journey, and hopefully you've enjoyed. I've been very grateful for your perspective, and even if you don't necessarily see it because you don't stick around for what the students say afterwards, they always appreciate you joining. So
Yeah, well, it's always fun just to. I mean, I just love that you're having those conversations. A lot of the stuff that we try and do here on the podcast or at the Collision, you're doing in a school setting, face to face with some really smart teenagers, high school kids. So love what you're doing, and just love your insight into movies and into films. I know you're a deep thinker in that. So I wanted to have you on to for this conversation of genres, and I think it does tie in a bit to like you mentioned earlier. You show a variety of genres and types of films. Like I know the ones I zoom in for: Lord of the Rings, Inside Out, and A Quiet Place. Have kind of been the 3 movies that I've come in for the class. And I know you show superhero movies, you show comedies, and so you sort of see firsthand in that setting the way different genres are. How people resonate with them, what the types of conversations that come out. So I wanted to have us a genre conversation, just in general, just genres, and the different strengths and maybe weaknesses. How do we approach things like movie genres, and then obviously on a faith and pop culture podcast, sort of from a faith perspective, like how does the gospel resonate, echo from differently in a horror movie as an action movie? And so a lot of stuff to get into. So to kick things up, I thought we'd just talk about sort of, I don't know, maybe our own favorite genres. I pulled you can trust Google and you can trust AI, so you can definitely trust Google's AI. So I pulled a list of just sort of the main sort of genre. Obviously there's like a endless amount of subgenres, but kind of the main genres just to set the table that coming up.
In alphabetical order, please.
in reverse,
Well,
so Z to A.
yeah,
if you
Yeah.
could.
yeah. I'll let you edit this into alphabetical order. But you have action, you have adventure, comedy, drama, horror, sci-fi, fantasy, romance, thriller / suspense, western, crime, musical, and documentary. And it wasn't included. I was wondering about war. I feel like war to me is its own genre, but maybe that's a subgenre. It wasn't included, at least in the list. So maybe to start off, before we kind of get into talking about the genres, like what are the ones that you guys like? I think we all watch all types of movies, but I think we all have we have our go-tos. Like we have the ones that we enjoy the most. Like I don't know, Naya, maybe you go first, and then Eunice
Yeah.
can jump in.
I was looking through my letterboxed like top 4, but I would say like dramedies, like old adventure movies, and probably war movies. Like when I was in college though, genres were always like my weak spot. I was like, this could be this genre or this genre or this genre. So I always had a hard time categorizing movies into a specific genre. That's why, hence dramedies being my top one. But what about you, Unix? What are your top
Yeah.
3
You have to
genres?
you have to help me define what a dramedy is, because I'm trying to wrap my mind around that. But I always struggle with like favorite questions. I was talking with my wife, so shout out to her on this podcast because she's amazing. But I was like, what's like my favorite genre? And she thought about it for a little bit, and she said instantly, she was like, you like whodunit type story. So like the
Ooh.
mystery genre. And the more I thought about it, I was like, okay, I could see that. Like, and it's not just like movies, like, so like whether it's like the latest Knives Out movie or whether it's like, I don't know, like a Hallmark, murder mystery type movie, but
Uh-huh.
even like the TV shows that I tend to like, if I'm just like, what do we want to watch? So like whether it's like older murder, whodunits like Angela Lansbury in Murder She
Uh-huh.
Wrote, classic.
Uh-huh.
But even like more modern like Monk, Psych, like
Yeah.
just like and I suppose there's our blending of genres within those, like they're procedural, they're comedic in nature as well. But I think at the heart of it is this like, mystery element. So I don't even know if that's on your list, but that's how I view
No, yeah, I'm curious. I wonder if that would be.
A
I suppose it should be on
mystery?
the list.
I
Like
feel like that
unless
is.
they include that in like crime or suspense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been into the mystery. I don't know what's got me into. I've been reading like the Chesterton, Father Brown
Oh, nice.
mysteries, and like just sort of. I never really was into that genre of movie or book. So mystery. Yeah, I feel like they're making a comeback too. Like I know the last movie I reviewed as time of recording is The Sheep Detectives, which is a mystery for kids. It's like a love letter to mysteries, and I enjoyed it. I think for me, and this is probably no, a surprise to no one who listens to this podcast. Like, I love me some like creature horror movies. Like my favorite movie ever is Jaws. One of my next favorite is Alien. I love A Quiet Place. Like that genre of sort of the suspense, the horror, but usually with like an alien or a creature or a monster or a shark or something. Like I've seen every shark movie ever made, and they're like 90% awful, but still awesome in their in their own unique way. And obviously, so I love sci-fi as a genre just because I always find it interesting what they can do with it. And disaster movies. I don't. That's
He's
another
just like
genre that.
everything that's falling apart. Is what it
Yeah, I
sounds
think that's
like.
what I like. If the world's falling apart, either by scary creatures or aliens or invasions or just natural disasters and weather. That's my genre.
you
Which
just like
I
to
don't know what
watch
that
the
says about
world
me.
burn. Like you are
Exactly.
the
Yeah, I'm like the
closest
Joker.
Michael Caine was saying that line too. It wasn't Christian Bale. It was Daniel Blackaby. It was just
Daniel, you are
Yeah.
the ultimate diva, it sounds like to me.
Yeah, maybe there's a catharsis to just sort of watching the world fall apart and seeing heroism come through from
Oh, there
that.
it is.
But kind of the first question I thought we could kind of get into, and this maybe in some ways leads into the faith conversation too. Um, but I think just in general as well, like kind of just the question, like, are all genres created equal? Like, obviously everyone, even as we share, like there is that subjective nature to, like, we all like different things, and that doesn't mean one's objectively better or not. But like, I don't know, like, are all genres, like, is it sort of neutral? Like you're starting from a foundation and you can sort of do whatever, either just story wise or as far as like gospel themes. Like, I don't know. Unix, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that as far as this sort of.
I was trying to think about it. I guess the way I've initially started to kind of, ponder that question is I don't know if I think I could say, I could be convinced that genres are equal because I think that within each genre, not all stories are created equally in terms of like the strong storytelling. So like
Hmm.
I feel like the genre is really more of the vehicle and it's the person that's driving that genre. Right? We could probably think of like a ton of different genres like the mystery genre, for example. Like I would definitely not put like a Hallmark mystery at the same caliber as like any other type of, murder mysteries, like the most recent Knives Out movie or something like that. I think that is much better in terms of, the craftsmanship, the arts. Um, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
I agree. I think that you summed it up really well.
Yeah, so this maybe be my hot take. Because I do agree, but I feel like it's sort of, for me, it's like a yes and a no. I think in one sense they are,
Too
I don't think.
complicated.
Yeah, see, if you just say yes and no, then you're always right and wrong, and then you please everyone and you please no one. I agree though. Like you're saying, I think is you can easily find like good and bad films have come out of every genre. Like there's any genre you look at, like there's great movies that have been made in that genre. There's not great, like, no genre guarantees that a movie's going to be good or I think bad. I do think there are some genres that are just more limited though. Like I think there are um, that are more prone to. It's easier to make a bad than maybe some other genres. Like I think of like the slasher movies, like the horror kind of that's like more a subgenre. Um, I think there have been good slasher movies that actually explore some themes. I think those movies very easily also become just sort of desensitizing kind of cheap entertainment, violence for spectacle, especially when you start bringing in like the faith component. Like I think it's harder to make one of those movies that is edifying and like great, uh, thought-provoking art than maybe it would be like another, like a drama or I don't know, a war movie. Not that you can't make desensitizing war movie or like something like an like erotic thriller. Like I think that can very quickly become just sort of overly sexualized, sort of sensual. That's not actually saying anything interesting about uh, its subject matter beyond just like kind of a pornographic sense of the genre. So I do think I don't know if I'm skirting around the line too much, but I do feel like I don't know if I would necessarily say that like some genres are better than others. I just think they are very different. Like I don't think every genre is neutral. I think you can tell different stories in different genres, and some genres you can tell lots of stories. Other genres you can't really. There's not only so much you can kind of do with it. So maybe it's not good, better or worse, but just different. I don't know. Does that? uh, Do either of you guys want to contradict me on that?
I mean,
I mean, I feel like
that
you're
is a yes
just
and no answer.
yeah.
So, like, at least you're consistent with what you said the answer was gonna be.
I feel like you're just saying the same thing that Unix was saying. Honestly, I think your focus is more on the actual movies that are than the genre itself. Um, I don't know, because I think if you're creative enough that you could take a slasher, take a classic slasher and make it say something different and change up, like subvert the genre expectations, if you will. I don't know if there's necessarily a limit to every genre, or maybe there is, and if you go out of it too much, it's just another genre or it's a new genre. I don't know. That's what I
Yeah, I don't know.
think.
Yeah, I don't know. I still feel like there's just a sense that like you know, like we haven't really done that. Like a lot of not that there haven't been some more thought provoking like slashers or some of those sort of
Yeah.
genres. But just I don't know. I think some genres are more fitted for certain things, and I don't think it necessarily makes it bad that it's a more limited genre. But I think it does make it. I don't know. It does make it a different type of genre
Mhm.
that's maybe less. I don't know, less potential to like touch on a wider range of human emotions
Mm.
or themes. And kind of on that note, whether you guys agree with me or not, what are sort of like because I think you guys probably do agree like, they are different. Like they have different strengths. They can do, they can like a horror movie can maybe uh, touch on like fear and deeper emotions like that than like a comedy can. Like so, what are sort of some of the strengths or like weaknesses of the genres? Like, what are I don't know if you guys can pick any of the genres, but like, are there any that you just think, and maybe you'd explain from some of your class discussions too? Like, are there some genres that just like, hey, this really resonates with this experience or this type of
Yeah,
person?
and I guess the way I could pull it into is like I know in terms of like pondering like different batches of students and how they perceive different sorts of films and how they respond or resonate or don't resonate to different things. One of the interesting things is I was looking because like I always do like a survey at the end of the year and I'm like, what should I change? What should I keep? And sometimes I tell them like even just be specific. Tell me like what movies you like or don't like. So Daniel, you may want to buckle your seatbelt because some of these may be painful for you
Oh,
specifically.
oh no, I know where this is going already.
But don't worry. One person did comment something to the effect like, "Do not get rid of Lord of the Rings. That is ludicrous." So, I mean, there you go. You made like a little
Easy A.
Tolkien disciple there. So, but one of the comments, and I think this just reflects the broader conversation culturally, but students, one of their main suggestions to me, and I've pivoted accordingly, is they said that they felt initially when I started doing the class that I was doing too many superhero films, and particularly too many Marvel films. I mean, Captain America's behind me, like that cardboard cutout. So like I enjoy Marvel, like I'd say Infinity Saga and throw in the Spider-Man movies are my exceptions
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like their attempt at the multiverse saga. But it's interesting, even within that superhero fatigue type discussion, there were some students that were saying like they appreciated DC Comics movies more than Marvel because they felt like Marvel was, I don't know, common criticism of being like formulaic, or it's easy to predict, or you kind of know what you're expecting out of that. And then the other piece is they really struggled with, in their words, older and slower paced films. So when they were talking about older, I used to show Star Wars, like A New Hope, because I was like, you know what, guys, like this is like it's important for you to have quote unquote older movies and to appreciate this, but like just the idea of the hero's journey and just all the archetypes that are in that is just like a perfect canvas. But they're like, Mr. Diza, this movie is so slow. Could we watch like some of the newer ones? And like I love Star Wars, and I just like 7, 8, and 9, like, is can we even call those Star Wars movies? I don't know. No, but um those are some of their responses in terms of, so like at least from a high school student perspective, in terms of what they perceive as kind of like strengths or weaknesses. Now, I will say the one exception to the superhero fatigue critique is always, I always show Iron Man, and without fail, that is always one of the each of the students like favorite films. And I think upon like just trying to think about it, talking it over with my wife, because I'm like a verbal processor, like that we came to the conclusion that it's probably because if you were to compare Iron Man to, I don't know, Captain America or Superman or Wonder Woman, those are tend to be very flat two-dimensional characters. They don't have a ton of character arc change, but Tony undergoes quite a bit of the character arc change from the beginning until the end. So I think, and students have always told me, they're like, I can relate a lot more to Tony, which is kind of insightful for them, because they're like, Tony's not the best guy in Iron Man 1, but they can relate to that, just like I think people can relate to Batman and the struggle that he has, more so than they could to like Captain America, who's like, you know, just always been good, or Superman, or depending on different storylines. People have different takes on these superheroes, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know if that answers your
Yeah.
question, but those are just some thoughts.
I mean, I think of how, like, I think this is exactly what you're saying, just kind of the cultural time period that we're in. Like, I think genres have strengths and weaknesses that can be super dependent on that. Like, when Singing in the Rain came out, we were in the middle of a war, and so all of these musicals just became super, super popular because everyone was depressed all the time. And so I think they're stronger or weaker in a certain time period because of what's going on in the world as well. Um,
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, because I think that, and that's what will lead into stuff we're going to talk about later too. Because I don't feel like the movie, like I don't feel like their strength and weaknesses depend or change necessarily on the culture. I just think what we want. Like I think we gravitate toward. Like I think musicals or even comedies, like their strengths that like uplift us and make us feel better when we need that, like when we need to be uplifted, like that becomes, we kind of go to those movies because that's what they're, they've always been good at that. It's just when we
mhm,
need it more. Or I think even things like superheroes, like I think there was a time when we sort of wanted to be some of the boom of when sort of the genre really exploded. Like we sort of wanted, there was this need for like heroism and skepticism towards authorities, and we need sort of that ideal, and then that kind of petered out. So yeah, I think it does depend on a lot of different, which is why I think it's important to just be aware of different genres, because I think they, like, I, and this will jump ahead, and we don't need to get to it now. But even like a lot of like the faith-based stuff that gets made, like we've sort of been making the same movies, and I say we, I've never made a movie, but I kind of historically they've sort of made the same genre of movies indifferent to the times that they're in. Like this is sort of a feel good drama, or whatever, and like we're just going to keep making this genre, this type of movie, regardless of what sort of the strength of the genres are or what the culture needs. And maybe just to transition into well, I don't want to say too. I feel like the superhero fatigue, and we can maybe get into it a bit more later. But like to me, in some ways, and I get like the comics have been around forever, and there's endless amounts of comics, and they've told a zillion different types of stories. So like I'm not saying that they're like limited, but I do feel like in some ways it has sort of shown the limitations of a genre. Like I think even a lot of the talk, this is my own perspective at least, like a lot of the talk about like there was always, this is like a Marvel movie, but it's like a horror movie, or it's a psychological thriller, and it's like, yeah, it is, but like they're all superhero movies. Like they all have that basis, and I think there's only so far you can stretch that genre before it either stops becoming a superhero movie or else you just sort of get the same thing. I do feel like there is a sense like the movies haven't. I mean, I think they have got worse, but like we just had so much of that genre that it's like, you can't have a theater just filled, every summer with one genre and without just starting to repeat yourself, because you need to actually just tell different stories. But kind of the question to bring it over to like the faith aspect is just sort of, if genres are different, if genres kind of are received differently, like Naya said, depending on like the situation you're in, and if they have like different strengths or weaknesses, right, they just operate on us differently for whatever reason. Like the question is, and maybe I'll start with you, Unix, as the expert, the brought in expert, is can it, can
no pressure.
yeah, no pressure, but we want the correct answer here. But can any genre reflect the gospel?
We need a definitive answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll and we can unpack this a bit, but I'll let you sort of kickstart.
Well,
that.
I feel like since I've been listening, carefully to what Daniel, one of the hosts, has been saying, I guess I have to say that you have to be really careful with that slasher film genre. Like it's just like but no, I guess when I was pondering it a little bit, right, and then I may throw in a hot take here or there just a little bit, but like,
we love
for
hot
example,
takes.
like if I were to go to the genre I said was my favorite, right, just like as a test case, like let's just use it as a litmus test. One of the articles that I use, because like in my class, we're not just watching movies, but they're also reading what people have written about the movies. So that's how I ended up, knowing who Daniel was, because we used one of his readings in my class. But this is not one of your articles, Daniel, I'm sorry to say. But Paul Assay, I think he writes for like Plugged In, like Focus on his like movie review ministry. Like, I think on his Patreon, he wrote this article when Murder on the Orient Express came out in 2017. And I was like looking at it, and like some of the quotes that he says from like famous mystery writers, like when they say that what the detective story is about is not murder, but the restoration of order. And you could riff off of, make faith-based or gospel connections there. But one of the things that I found to be most interesting, and this ties into, because I think you mentioned Chesterton in the Father Brown mysteries already, Daniel. This is what Paul writes in his article. He said, mysteries suggest that puzzles, even the biggest, have answers. I don't think it's an accident that some of the greatest mystery writers of our times have been Christian. Dorothy Sayers wrote books about the faith. James penned Children of Men, a powerfully theological book, and even my favorite Christian author, G.K. Chesterton, was perhaps most famous for his Father Brown mystery stories. And then Chesterton actually said this. He said, what we all dread most is a maze with no center, and that is why atheism is only a nightmare. And then Paul picks up and concludes the article. He says, classic mysteries give us mazes with centers, with answers, and that's why they're so satisfying to read and watch. So I don't know. I think like with that, and I don't know that maybe Murder on the Orient Express is maybe the best example for that, but I think that you can definitely see how a murder mystery as a genre, in terms of defined as, you're trying to figure out who did it, and the detective or whoever that intrepid person is trying to, bring some semblance of justice and order or finality or closure to it. There is a sense where you can make a connection in the sense that it reflects the gospel in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, what about you now? Because I think that is, yeah, because I feel like you can. I mean, the mystery one is a great one. I think they're, which is why I think you have so many Christians that wrote. I mean, same as fantasy. Some of these genres where you can sort of see there's like case studies of clearly we can tell gospel stories because we've done it as well as anyone in the culture. What about you now? Do you think can any genre um in some way reflect the gospel, or are there some, as I think some Christians may feel, is like, yeah, like most of them can, but like don't, not horror or not this or not, whatever it might be. Like,
Yeah.
can they all reflect the gospel?
I mean, I don't know how I'm supposed to top Unix's answer. What you're putting all this pressure on me. I mean, yeah, I think so. I really think it's just dependent on the film, on the story, and whoever's watching it. I mean, each genre, as we've talked about before, has different strengths and weaknesses, so maybe they're highlighting or reflecting different parts of the gospel at different times, and in different maybe it affects the culture or the viewer in different times as well. But I think the answer honestly is a hard yes, I would say.
Yeah, I think, but I think what you touched on too, I think they do it differently. Like, I think every genre can, and I think you can find examples probably. Maybe not every, maybe you can, like every subgenre. Like, I'm sure if you go far enough, there's like, hey, this type of movie is just like antithetical to the
Yeah,
gospel, and it's hard to tell that. I mean, I can't think of any, but I'm sure there are some that it's like I
I can
can't
think of a
either
few.
to make it gospel centric. Maybe like push it beyond the borders of the.
Right. And I
But
think
I think even like,
Yeah, but
yeah.
I think, sorry to jump in here, but like I think what we're saying, and just to be clear, is like we're not saying that every, story or movie within that genre you can find connections, but we're just saying within the genre, like there, and I think, we'll get to this eventually, but I think each genre allows, us to be able to see a different aspect of, the gospel perhaps in
Mhm.
different ways, like the mystery, genre. And here I'll dump my hot take in here right
Oh,
now.
good.
Ooh,
I
hot
would
take.
I would even go so far as to say even your formulaic like Hallmark movies, I think even they can reveal a different element and aspect of the gospel. And when I was telling my wife about this, she was like, "Oh boy," because like in college, I'm not that much more of like a Hallmark guy now. Like I don't have like the socks that they advertise on social media where it's like, if you can see this, like I'm, watching my Hallmark movies or whatever. But like I do appreciate that, every now and again, I did watch When Calls the Heart, but that was prior, like only like the, first couple of seasons before they killed off my favorite character. Anyway, you didn't ask for that, but then you're getting this
I don't know
information.
any
So
of
let me
these
bring
references.
some semblance of order and gravitas to it. So if you don't want to take my word for it, I always brought up this article in college. I just think it was really good. So Brett McCracken writes for the Gospel Coalition. He writes some really good stuff, and he wrote an article back in 2017 called "Formulaic for a Reason: The Existential Appeal of Hallmark Movies." Um, and I don't want to just like read a bunch of quotes all the time, but like his words, like I can't like do justice by like trying to paraphrase or summarize it. But he's like, so here's his take. Here's his take. He says Hallmark films are not beautiful because they are expertly crafted. I think we can all agree about that. Nor are they beautiful because they are invariably full of beautiful people. They are beautiful because they are formulaic in a good way and because they are simple and earnest in a chaotic, cynical world. Cynicism is exhausting. For many years, cynicism led me to immediately dismiss formulaic stories like Hallmark movies, Julia Roberts rom-coms, and Marvel blockbusters. But while there are other reasons to critique these films, formulaic storytelling shouldn't necessarily be one of them. Simple and predictable isn't always a bad thing. And then he concludes in this way. He says, do we need more films and TV narratives to remind us of the harshness, complexity, and fallenness of the world? Maybe, but these realities are ever present in our hyper-connected world where there's no shortage of constant reminders of darkness. And then he asks, I wonder if what we actually need right now are more narratives of hope, more stories of decent people being kind to one another, and more old fashioned narratives of tales old as time love, reminders that when it comes to resonant visions of humanity as it was meant to thrive, there is nothing new under the sun. So my hot take and my contention is even formulaic Hallmark movies where, guy meets girl and there's snow in the background and that, there's going to be some sort of conflict because there's this, I don't know, guy that owns a business, and like an old boyfriend or something. I feel like even in that, it can reflect the gospel. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think too, like you just quoted the Brett's article where he's sort of ending on the Ecclesiastes 3 verse, sort of in his final quote, because I think that's a big one too for me. Like the sort of there is a time for everything, like a season for every activity under the heavens, and obviously you can stretch that verse too far. It's not like there's and there's a time for sin and there's a time. Like, no, that's not like what the verse is saying. But I do think that verse indicates that like you kind of everything can be good in its proper place when approached at the right time in the right way. And like obviously that's not talking about like movie genres, but I think that can apply to movie genres. That I think like every genre has like their own. I think there's variety within genres, but there are like strengths and things that certain genres can do better than other genres, or just more naturally prone to do than other ones. And I think like in their proper time, like if you just all you do is just sort of live in your fantasy Hallmark world, that's probably not good. If all you do is live in your dark, depressing, nihilism, nothing meaningless world, like that's not good either. Like you sort of need both of those. And I'd say too, there's a book. I don't know if you were familiar with this, Diza. Art. Let's see if we can get on screen. Art and Action. It's a bit of like a higher end philosopher. And Nicholas Wolterstorff, like an aesthetic philosopher, and he talks in the book. He kind of made popular just sort of the idea of like he calls it fittingness, saying like there is sort of like a proper fit for like vehicle and message in a sense. Like what would come to mind is like can any genre worship God, like musical genre? It's like, yeah, like I think any genre, there's no like sinful genre necessarily, but like are some genres better for certain, like can death metal be used in a worship to God? Like, yeah, it can. It absolutely can. But like is death metal the proper sort of fitting vehicle for like, to come humbly before God and worship, like meditate? No, like there are limitations to the genre that it can still worship God. It's not the one that we should use to, there are other genres of music that can work better on that fit better for that we want to sing death metal in church and worship. Like that expresses other emotions like anger or frustration. There's things that can do. And maybe from there, for both of you two, and I can jump into like, are there some genres that just reflect the gospel? I don't want to say better. My question was better, but I think it just like, are there, I don't know, like maybe just in what ways have certain genres reflected certain aspects of the gospel? Like, I'm curious, Unix, like in your class, because you watch a variety of different genres, like are there certain, I don't know, like certain, whenever you show a horror movie that sort of leads students to connect with this aspect of the gospel, or when you see a comedy, they connect with this, or like, how have you sort of seen like various genres kind of resonate with people differently based on just the genre strengths?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that came to mind first is like I try to do at least a couple like animated films or like movies from like their childhood, which is kind of getting harder and harder as like, the kids are getting younger and younger. I'm like, wait, how old were you when Inside Out came out? Like, I don't know anymore. Like, were you a kid then? Have you seen Inside Out? I don't know. Um, but like, for example, we watch Horton Hears a Who, so like Dr. Seuss, but like the
A
movie,
classic.
That's
because
such a
one of
good
the things we
movie.
wanted to show them was like, and we'll read the book at the start of class before we even watch the movie. Um, because I'm like, you probably read this as a kid, and you probably are just like, "Pfft, kids literature." I think kids literature is sometimes woefully underestimated. Let me just say that, by the way. I think that there's some really powerful, profound things that even kids literature can convey, and I think even in like a kids movie like that, I think that the concept of Horton, and then he's protecting all these little Who's and Whoville on this like little clover. The dynamic of like have like the Who's had to have faith in like a being, that is in control of something and they're not in control. Now, obviously, you want to be cautious because we're not saying that Horton the elephant is like God or Jesus. That would be a really bad connection to make. But just like the opportunities to have conversations from even like a simple, kids book that rhymes kind of a deal.
Mhm.
That's something that can be profound. And even like with A Quiet Place, which I think is A Quiet Place is always the one that I throw in there, and you've joined us for discussions on A Quiet Place, Daniel, because that genre is generally the one where it's like that one can be taboo, and for in some respects, depending on what type of like, it's not like I'm gonna show, Saw or Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something in my film class. I think we discussed that today when you joined us. But I think it's one of those things where it gets them to think about it in a different way. And it gets them like we talk about how I share with them a quote from a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey. He says fiction creates a mental laboratory that invites us to explore challenges and opportunities that we might otherwise overlook. So just like fiction is just a great test case for you to try to think through some things and process through things, even though it's most likely never going to happen to you, in the sense like you have to be quiet, like don't eat any chips because the aliens are going to come and get you if you make noise. But like it just gets you to consider things in a different way and process it. And then it can still have meaning and apply to your life in a really beautiful way. So
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what about you now? Like, are there different like? Do you pick movies like based on your mood? Like, are you a genre person like that, or like I don't know,
Um,
like
maybe. I mean, I think I normally, so it's not like I'll be like, I'm sad today, I'm gonna watch a rom-com. It's like, am I in the mood to watch an artsy movie or more of a mainstream blockbuster movie? Like, that's the difference for me. Um, but I feel like I just need to sit and listen to all of this wisdom. I really don't have much to add.
well, I think it's I don't know. Like, I think that's what's cool about your class, Unix, is like the just exposing people to different genres. Like I think a lot of people do, over the course of time, probably do expose themselves to various genres. But I do think there are, um, I think especially Christians. Like I think there, and maybe that's too broad of a statement, but like there is, I don't know, a safety to certain types of genres. Like like you're saying, for a lot of Christians, they grew up like horror was taboo, and they just weren't exposed to horror movies. Which meant they missed, ones that they probably were good to miss, and they also missed ones that they could have really been edified by or challenged or like made uncomfortable in like a natural, healthy way that shakes us out of our like complacency and our sense of control and like all the good things that horror can do. Like I've known Christians like essentially if you were to go through their like letterbox, or like it's all just sort of feel good dramas. It's all the same type of movie, and obviously there's variety. Like a drama, even a feel good one, can touch on many different experiences. So it's not like it's just they're getting the same dose, feel good medicine every day, but it does tap into the same, I don't know, types of emotions and feelings in some ways. Like that I think that I don't know, there is sort of this sense that I think being able to like expose yourself to different genres in like a whole because I think I even mentioned this or tried to mention it. I was tired in your
Yeah.
class this morning that there is, I don't know, I think when we think of like finding the gospel in movies, as Christians, a lot of times I think we were taught to like we want to find like the gospel, like in its entirety in this movie. Where I think of it more in terms of like you find little nuggets of the gospel, and those over time kind of add up to, like
Mhm.
this horror movie makes me realize I'm not in control. This movie, feel good movie, makes
Mhm.
me realize that there is healing through that lack of control. And this movie over here makes me realize, that there's whatever it is, like
Yeah.
collectively you start to sort of resonate with the gospel
yeah.
as opposed to like every you got to have like the death and or birth and
I
death
know,
and
it's like
resurrection.
you're trying to shove too much information into one movie and it's exhausting and then it probably doesn't make sense and everyone's
Mhm.
confused and stops paying attention. But like really focusing on one aspect, even on like the story of David or Daniel, like even focusing on that's all part of of scripture. And so I think it's all very valuable to explore in film, and it's more impactful when it's focused and not just the entire creation to resurrection to
Yeah.
revelation story.
But
And
piggybacking off of what you both said, yeah, Danny, you called it like nuggets, and I was like, ooh, like Chick-fil-A nuggets, and now I'm hungry. But um, we call it like echoes. You're just looking for echoes of the gospel, and I love what Naya
I
said,
like
because
that.
one of the things that I always caution my students in is like, we're not trying to force the gospel into where it's not. Like, we don't want to, you know, make really bad representations or really weak connections just because like
Mhm.
the gospel's strong enough on its own that it can stand on its own. It's
Mhm.
it's out it's you know it's just it's powerful enough, and you don't need to force it in there. Like, it's like, oh no, if I don't force this connection in there, then these people won't hear Jesus. Like, we don't need to worry
Yeah.
about that. But I also think like one of the strongest arguments, it just came to me about like the benefit of exposing us to like different genres, is when you just think of like the Bible that we read or that we follow. There's so many different genres of literature within scripture, right? From narrative to poetry, to apocalyptic literature and all these different sorts of things. And I don't think I think that's purposeful, because I think God was trying to convey to us that, when I chose to record this story, this grand story of scripture, I'm not just going to use one genre to convey the powerful truths of, this grand meta narrative of scripture. I'm going to use different genres to convey things, right? Like, I definitely don't think that, the story of Daniel in the lion's den in poetic language is going to be the best vehicle to do that. You just need
Mhm.
to tell the story, right? And
Yeah.
vice versa. So I think what you guys shared
That's
just made me think of that.
really That's a really good point. And just like thinking through like the Old Testament specifically, like I can pinpoint most of the most if not all of these genres that we have written down, like maybe not documentary. Um or maybe the whole thing is documentary, you know what I'm saying? But like I feel like each of these genres is utilized in throughout scripture, which I had never thought about before. So it's a really good point.
Yeah, and even like I would in some ways like the genre almost doesn't even matter as much as the fact that it's just an unfamiliar genre. Like, I mean, I think it does matter for all the reasons that we've talked about, but I think this the act of watching a genre that is not your go-to, say, like, familiar, what you're accustomed to, like whether because I think for everyone that's going to be a different genre. Like if you always watch horror movies, then maybe it's a comedy or a musical or something. Like I know even for me, like I've started, I'm still not like it's not high on my list of favorites, but like anime movies like that, I know they're all over the place now, and that's never been my what's I've never been drawn to those, but like I've reviewed some, and I've like gone out of my way to try and watch some more, just because it's different. And like I think just the act, even beyond what the movie or the genre echoes in the gospel, like just that like different perspective on things, I think is an edifying Christian activity that is beneficial even before you get to any of the actual echoes like in there. I'm gonna throw it over to you, Unix. So there's a couple things we could do because we're before we finish the episode, we could talk about just briefly touch on just sort of movies being made, like sort of movies of faith and maybe some genres they could explore. But I did, because we have you on here. Was there anything else, like, as you sort of thought about genres, or anything that we haven't touched on um, that as you sort of worked through some of this in your own mind, that you just think would be, I don't know, anything that you sort
Yeah.
of landed on,
Uh,
or is...
Yeah, I appreciate. Wow, I'm being given the floor. Wow, I will take it, because that very rarely happens in my in my circles. So I will take it. But yeah, it's been a joy to be back and to have this
Yeah.
conversation. One of the thoughts that I just was thinking of is when you think about like the power of genres to be able to like get people to like think about things differently. Like, one of the movies, I always end my film classes with the movie Arrival, which I think is like just such a beautifully well done sci-fi movie, but it's so deliberately paced. It's very
Mhm.
purposeful and intentional. It's not like Michael Bay explosion, like
Yeah.
different things like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that particular genre of
Yeah.
movies, but this one is a really tough sell for my students because, right, like it's slow paced. It's thankfully not old, but they're just like, where is this going? But I was so very proud of them because we were able to have some really good discussions. Like, I think it was my father-in-law that has said that like all good sci-fi does is it just asks really good questions and gets you to ponder them, right?
Mm.
And one of the articles that I used for Arrival. Wait, I need to cite my sources here. I think this is from the Think Christian website. I don't think that ministry is operating anymore, sadly, but one of the articles on Arrival there, they said the author suggests that one of the questions that Arrival asks is if we could make decisions with knowledge of the future, would we choose pain and suffering? And what I was
Mhm.
trying to get my students to understand is like, Louise had a really difficult choice in that movie because she knew the end result of what having Hannah as a child would be, like all the joys, but also all the pain of her cancer and then her death at the very end, and she still chose to do that. And I think normally nowadays people would be like, "Oh, if I could forget certain parts of my upbringing, I would," or if I need a future, then I'd be able to avoid those things. But I think all throughout Scripture has embedded this idea, like there's a purpose to all the pain. Like we don't seek it out for sure, but it's just such a like you're much stronger and your story is much more beautiful and robust because of how God sees us through those things and how he grows us and how he prunes us in those areas. And I just think like this sort of a vehicle, like I could tell them, um, you know what, there's purpose in your pain, right? And I could just like say that, or I could try to just try to convey that to them in kind of like a formal lesson. But if I show them the movie and I bring them along in this journey and they can try to identify and connect with this story and with these characters, it just allows the story to land in a much, much better way, a much more beautiful way, and probably a much more memorable way, I think, too. I think that's the power and the beauty of stories. Um, so that's one thought I had. And then the last thing that I was thinking, Daniel, is when I was just talking with my wife, I was like, hey, here's all these questions. We don't have to go through all of them, but I always like to like pick her brain because she's really brilliant and bright. And when it comes to like the different types of genres, um, and like the benefit of exposing ourselves to the different types of genres, um, I've like from personal experience, I am a much like stronger person and also much more conversant in different types of genres because I married Caroline. Because when I was growing up, like my favorite type of genre was like the escapist type comedic. Like I love Singing in the Rain, so I love musicals. I also love like comedies, like even classic comedies. So like Danny Kaye's Court Jester, Buster Keaton's silent film The General, right? So like these are masterfully done films and these are master comedians, but I was like, oh, I just want to laugh. I don't want to think too much or do anything that makes my brain hurt. And then I met her and she wants to watch Inception and Interstellar and
Oh,
The
she's got
Village.
good
And
taste.
I have a deep love of those movies now, but if I hadn't met her and if I hadn't, at the time felt like I was being subjected to these movies and I was like, what is going on? What's Christopher Nolan doing with time here? Like what even is happening? Like what's going on? But beautiful stories, and we're able to have some really good discussions. And one of the things that she's always been fond of saying is that um there are definitely some people in our circles who may never darken the doors of a church, or like we may never be able to convince them, but just by the way we live our lives, and also if we're conversant in these things, like they may not want to talk about Jesus like directly, but they may want to talk about the most recent movie that they've watched, or if they love a particular type of genre. And then if you are at least conversant in, it doesn't mean that you have to watch the movie, you have to watch every single movie so that you can be able to relate to people, but if you know a little bit about the different genres, you'll be able to say, hey, you know what? I like that movie too, but here's why. And it just allows for, it opens so many doors to be able to have those like gospel opportunities just to plant seeds and start a conversation that I think like, why wouldn't we not want to set ourselves up for that as much as possible? I think it's like a very great opportunity. So those are
Yeah,
just some
well, yeah, it's
personal
interesting.
thoughts.
Yeah, it's I mean fun too. Like even here at the collision, like there's been various times where I've been able to like actually connect and have like pretty interesting conversations with like atheists or non people outside the church, and it's usually on movies that are sort of unexpected. Like okay, now this sparks something within them, and obviously they know we're a Christian ministry, so they sort of know where I'm coming at. But b- I mean, even like surprisingly disrespectful dialogues on the basis of movies that are touching on it's never the faith-based dramas. It's always some other type of like a horror movie. Surprisingly, is one that often gets a lot of these conversations. And maybe the last thing, and then we're gonna we can go to the last segment of the podcast too. Is like because even like I was trying to look up as research, like what are this like the most popular genres right now or whatnot, and didn't end up using any of the data because it's just hard to like the only sort of way you can equate unless there's this sort of surveys and stuff which I wasn't able to find like all the articles are sort of like box office and like what gets made and like that's sort of how they equate what and I think kind of like you touched on this a second ago Unix like I think there's also a sense that, like some genres or at least like a lot of the films within certain genres are just more accessible than others like there's I think some genres like especially like the real good movies in that genre like they I don't know like you sort of need to work at it a bit and like learn to sort of how to I think even like horror movies in a lot of ways like you can obviously feel just scared and you can approach a movie at a base level of I was scared it made me feel uncomfortable that was my experience but I think to like really engage with sort of some of those themes and stuff if you haven't watched horror movies like there are some skill that maybe like an action movie is a little bit more simplistic in that sense. Like it's not that it's worse, it's just I think more accessible, or even like an animated movie or so I don't know. I think there is the sense that like just because a genre isn't like you don't immediately resonate with it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a lot to tell you. It may just be that either because of the genre or just because of who you are and where you come from, like you may need to just sort of think through that and grow and kind of learn the language of the genre so that you can really engage with a lot of the things that you may miss, like the symbolism and some of that. But
Absolutely.
speaking of, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I was
but
just gonna
speaking,
say, it just made me think real quick, like, that's the difference between, like, amusement and discernment, right? At the beginning of my class, I always tell my kids, I was like, "All right, what does the word muse mean?" And unfortunately, that tends to stop them. I'm like, "Guys, the word muse means to, like, to think deeply about things. So if you put the prefix "a" in front of that, what does that mean? Oh, not to think. Kinda like you're at the amusement park, you're just escaping things." But I was like, I think that's where engaging your mind and discernment, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start teaching the class because, like, I think this like the field is so ripe, like there's so much potential to be able to seize the opportunity to engage in these conversations, but you can't do it if you're, like you said, if you're not engaging your minds. And I think that's one of the things that's really neat about the work that you guys are doing and the conversations that you're having is you're providing people the opportunity to then have conversations of their own to engage their minds in that discussion. And I think that's a really worthwhile thing.
yeah, and I think maybe even like think of something like the Oscar movie or something that's sort of the common criticism is the movie that the movies that nobody actually watches and like as though that's bad. And the sense like no like a lot of those I mean there are popular movies that get nominated too but like they're not aiming for necessarily just amusement they're aiming for other things and we just need to learn how to sort of understand what they're actually doing and dealing with as opposed to just well did it make me feel did I enjoy that hour with popcorn so yeah I think that is a key difference but speaking of the jury is out is of whether this will embody amusement or discernment is the final segment of this podcast we have things we like that you should like too. So as our special guest of honor, you're going to give me a reprieve. Naya continually recommends just
Really great things that Daniel
sometimes
loves, all of
abominations.
them.
Fruit and Nutella, just things that I'm trying to. So as often as I can.
I don't think
kick
that's
the
as
floor.
hot a take as you think it is, Daniel.
Oh, it should be. I feel like I'm
Your
alone
take
on my
is the hot
mountain.
take.
Wow,
I'm
you
the
wait,
enlightened on the
you're
mountain.
taking an issue with Nutella? Like,
Oh,
Yes.
on strawberries. Where do you fall on the? Before
wait,
we get to your
I don't see wait, I don't see a problem with that at all. It's like, a
Thank you,
better version of
Unix.
chocolate strawberries. It's like Nutella.
Yes,
Like I have
you're
like,
so right.
peanut butter and Nutella sandwiches like as often
Yes.
as I can, but like, yeah,
Daniel
Well,
just doesn't understand.
yeah. See, I had respect for you, Unix. I had high
And my
a high
respect
opinion,
has
and I feel
soared.
like yeah, never meet your heroes. I feel like I'm starting to some of those
there we go. I'm never
feelings are
being
crumbling.
invited back on the podcast again. You guys heard it first.
Yeah,
It wasn't me. It was just because of the hate for Nutella. Hashtag save
Yeah, so
Nutella, guys. Like, come on now.
well, it's a lonely life to be constantly alone and right. But beyond your bad take on fruit and Nutella, what is one thing, Unix, that you like that you think other people should like too?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think last time I was on, I shared the wonderfulness of the work of the great Andrew Peterson. So I think I'm going to go back to the well of great children's literature authors, um, and also recommend to your guys' listeners the great S.D. Smith. So he wrote the Green Ember series, and all you need to know about that is it's rabbits and swords. I mean, come on
Oh, I
now.
love it
Like
already.
it's just like in addition to the Wingfeather Saga by Andrew Peterson, that's one of the things that it's like on our bookshelves, and when our kids are old enough, that will become, required reading in our household. And anytime I say those sorts of, phrases to my wife, she's like, "Well, I need to read it first," but like she was convinced too. And I think one of the things I appreciate about both of those guys, but especially SD Smith, is he releases like a newsletter like once a week or different things, and I appreciate his thoughts, but he's really just about writing just really good stories. And obviously he's a believer and his faith is going to shine through there, but he's not trying to be preachy or necessarily explicit. Not that there's anything bad with that, but I just appreciate someone who's just trying to write really good stories. And I want that for my kids when they get old enough. I want them to love good stories. I want them to learn about what it is to be courageous and to be brave and to persevere through difficult things. And the Green Ember series is fantastic, and he's still writing books to it. So I would just heartily recommend anything that S.D. Smith has done. He is fantastic.
Are you familiar with those books? I was not familiar with and I feel like I just pulled it up on my Google. I feel like I recognize the visuals of it, but I don't know. I missed. What would be like what's the target reading age for that? Like I have two 11-year-old
Yeah, he's
kids.
definitely, I would say, like a middle grades writer. But I mean, come on, guys. Obviously, my wife and I are reading these, and like now, for us, we'll be able to plow through it much quicker. But he's definitely like a middle grades reader. Like his most recent book, or one of the most recent books that he did it so that, and he made the text like much more readable, especially for young kids, especially boys. So like there's a lot more spacing, and the kerneling of the reading is just much better, so that young men can be able to like actually read and appreciate good literature. So he's very thoughtful about that sort of stuff. But he is excellent. Yeah, I appreciate the ministry that he's doing through writing. So
Yeah, well, I will definitely check that out for, and maybe even the audiobooks for. I know my kids, they went through the Wingfeather books and just
yep.
ate those up. I mean,
Start with the
they
Green
did.
Ember series rather than all the other spin-offs and whatnot. So yeah. It's
Yeah, well, look at
four books in the main Green Ember series.
that is Unix coming in from the top rope. 2 episodes now with some good book recommendations. It's a bit of a, I don't know, the term Renaissance man is coming to mind, and not just talking about movies. He's coming into some literature.
Let's go full circle. I'll just take Diva instead of Renaissance man. It sets the bar much lower.
I think you've earned that title.
Yeah, we'll put a poll out and see which one applies. But whether you're a Renaissance man or a diva, appreciate you coming back on the podcast. This will definitely, they say third time's the charm. Not that you struck out the first 2, but we'll definitely look forward to having you back on at some point. Just I don't know, I love talking movies with you. I know when I come into your class, we don't really have a chance to just geek out about movies, so it's fun to pull you onto the podcast, maybe get some more book recommendations. Maybe leave it. We'll wait long enough so I forget that you sided with Naya when it comes
He's
to
right. What can I
to
say?
food. I'll forget that, and then I'll we'll have you back on. But real quick before we end the episode, I know Naya mentioned you have a website, and where can people find? Like, I don't know how much writing you've been doing lately, or is there anywhere people can find if they want to just, follow your work or your thoughts, or read some of your hot takes on film?
Absolutely. Let me see. I had sent something to
You sent
Naya
your movie
or
amusement
oh
website.
I just it's just a WordPress blog that I have. It's called Movie Musement. So moviemusement.wordpress.com. And I blog very occasionally. Like we just had our third kid. We have all boys, so we just had our third kid at the end of March. So if you're looking for something current from me, just listen to this podcast is what I guess I would say. But like writing is hopefully something I'll have more time to do in the future, but I just blog very occasionally. But yeah, my thoughts are there and you can feel free to engage with me there. Yeah.
Yeah. Every now and then you descend down from the mountaintop to impart your sage wisdom before going back up to the world of kids and newborns and diapers and and all of that fun stuff. But like I said, appreciate you coming back on. Love talking movies. Love your wisdom, your insight, and really love what you're doing. Actually practicing this in real time with students and having these conversations. And I love that I've been able to sort of peek in every now and then and see you work your magic and just spark conversations with young teenagers. So love what you're doing. Love that you're on this podcast, and appreciate everyone else for tuning in once again, joining these conversations. Again, if you have thoughts on genres or even just your favorite movie genre, don't be shy. Let us know in the comments, and we hope we will see you again next week, every Thursday, for more conversations on faith and pop culture.